Girl, I'm gagged. Oh my gosh. Was not expecting to fall so head over heels obsessively in love with this book. I read The Scarlet Veil in like one day. Do you see this thing? It's 627 pages. I read most of it in one day. I could not stop reading this thing. I barely remembered to eat. I certainly did not drink enough water that day. I forgot about bathroom needs. I was obsessed. I was wired. Just devoured this thing. So, quick little background for you. The Scarlet Veil is a spin-off book from the Serpent and Dove trilogy. If you have not watched my video on how I felt about the Serpent and Dove trilogy, feel free to go watch it. Or I can give you just a quick spoiler alert. It was not the greatest thing. It was very middle of the road for me. It was just kind of like, it was fine. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great either. So when I picked up The Scarlet Veil, I was not expecting a whole lot. And maybe that's the reason this book blew me out of the water, is I was expecting middle of the road. I was like, yeah, it's probably gonna be okay. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with an okay book. I don't know if my obsession over this book stems from just the fact that it's about vampires, which is so possible. I love vampires with all my heart. So to have a book about vampires, frankly, I'm not too surprised that I loved this book the way that I did. But let's talk about the elements of The Scarlet Veil that made me love The Scarlet Veil so much. One, like we've already established, vampires. The Scarlet Veil centers around vampires within the established world of the Serpent and Dove trilogy. So there's still like magic, there's still like the rules of the world have been established. We've just introduced vampires. The vampires are pretty stereotypically vampiric. Of course, you have the dark, brooding, mysterious male love interest vampire. I am a sucker for those. Pun intended, thank you. And I'm obsessed with vampires. I love them a lot, and I've loved them since I was like 11, 12 years old. Also, if you have not seen the video on Twilight by ContraPoints, highly recommend. It should not be surprising, knowing how much I love vampires, that that's one of my favorite YouTube videos of all time. Go check it out. The second element that really just propelled The Scarlet Veil above the original trilogy was it has a frickin' murder mystery. I knew that I enjoyed murder mysteries because I really like the Blackbird Sisters mysteries. I grew up on murder mystery shows. Literally my favorite show as a child was Remington Steele, which is a detective show from the 80s. I also loved Matlock. Solving mysteries has just been so central to me that when there's a book that isn't primarily about murder mystery and then you throw it in there, I'm going to have an even better time than I possibly was before. Murder mystery is just really fun for me. So to have this like murder mystery, we're solving, we're investigating aspect just elevated the story for me. Finally, let's talk about the romance. Just in case you did not watch my video ranting endlessly about the romance in the Serpent and Dove series, let me give you a quick overview. Serpent and Dove is an enemies to lovers trope that I feel was not very well executed. They went from enemies to lovers instantaneously. We spent an entire book learning why they shouldn't be together, which I'm sure was meant to be propped up as like, yeah, they have their problems, but they're meant to be. Cheer them on. I didn't see it that way. And then a book that tried to utilize the amnesia trope to reaffirm that these two are meant to be together. And I didn't buy it. I found the romance poorly executed, especially in the realm of enemies to lovers. Massive improvement. Oh my gosh. enemies to lovers in my head has a very standardized thoroughfare. There's step 1, step 2, step 3. And step 2, in my opinion, is the most vital. Step 1 is establishing them as enemies. The main characters in this book, by the way, I pronounced her name wrong. It's Sally, not Seely, but Seely stuck in my head. I'm gonna try to pronounce her name right. Sally and the main love interest, the vampire, Michael. I pronounced his name wrong too. It's most likely pronounced Michal, so I apologize. Just keep that in mind every time that I say his name wrong. Pretty solidly vampires, kind of a Beauty and the Beast, sort of, been kidnapped type of thing. Her life is threatened, blah blah blah. He's evil and mysterious and blah, 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 blah. So, step 2, most vital part, make them somehow become begrudging allies. Ding, 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 that's where the murder mystery comes in. They have to team up to unravel and investigate this mystery. And in doing so, it makes them see each other less as enemies and more as like, okay, we'll see. We'll see. And then step 3, you can then move into the territory of lovers. And huge spoiler alert, I love that by the end of this book, Michael and Sally are still not there. I personally think that that was a really smart move. They're out of the camp of enemies very solidly by the end of this book. They definitely have feelings for each other. They've fallen for each other, this, that, and the other thing. But there's nothing concrete yet. And personally, I love that. I prefer that kind of pacing so much better. Speaking of spoilers, can we talk about the way that this book ended? Excuse me, what cliffhanger? I currently do not own the second book. And I was so upset that I currently don't own the book. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean that this is the way that it ends? What do you mean? What? Excuse me? I can't just immediately start reading the next book. What am I going to do with my life? I decided that I was going to do nothing. I haven't read for the past several days because I can't. I need to know what happens next. I need it. You can understand, you can see what I mean by I was wired when that book ended because I was like, excuse you? We're ending this book on that note? I hate you and I love you all at the same time. I'm hoping to, like I said, get the second book soon. And then I will come back and I will give a review of that book. And we'll see what happens. I appreciate the fact that this is a duology and not a trilogy because, again, with the Serpent and Dove trilogy, one of the things that I really struggled with was how is there more plot? How are these books so long? How are they so big? How can there be so much more? This book, the way that it ended, I was very much like, well, of course there's more. And I'm very grateful that it's not going to be dragged out into a third book. Anyway, I'm going to stop it here. We're going to jump forward in time to my review of the second book. I did it. I completed the second novel. I was so excited to voraciously read this thing, and then I think I burned myself out. Oopsies! Because the ravenous obsession died. It took me 3 days to read this thing instead of 2. But let's talk about it. Obviously, there are vampires. Our main character, Sally, is now also a vampire with her soulmate, her true love, Michael. And I love it. I love the portrayal of vampires. I love the idea that, like, compared to something like Twilight, vegetarian vampirism cannot exist. Her body literally refuses to intake any other kind of blood except human blood. So she's essentially unintentionally being starved because she doesn't want to drink anyone's blood. Except in this, you can drink and survive off vampire blood, but that poses the risk of the eternal bond, I think. I can't remember what it's called, but it essentially like works like obsessive, possessive soulmates kind of a thing. So that's part of the romantic conflict in this story, is that Michael doesn't want to unleash the eternal bond upon Sally. And Sally isn't quite sure if she even wants the eternal bond with Michael until she decides that she wants it, because an eternity with him is perfect for her. I'm not sure if you've picked up on it yet or not, but I am not nearly as about this book as I was the first book. That does not mean that this book was bad. It just didn't have the same finesse. It didn't have the same glamour, glitz and glam as the first book did. And I want to talk about my theories as to why it wasn't as enjoyable for me. Again, solid 4 out of 5 stars, for sure, vampires. But it didn't hit the same way that the Scarlet Veil did. And I want to, like I said, discuss why. A big reason why I adored the Scarlet Veil so much is it had this murder mystery aspect to it. They had to find the killer and investigate, and it was the whole thing that made Sally and Michael move into the begrudging ally territory, which then allowed them to actually like each other and find their commonalities, this, that, and the other thing, build up on top of their physical attraction for one another, and I loved it. Spoiler, the book ends with kind of knowing who it is. And so book 2 is essentially plotting how to stop the killer. The problem that I have with the stakes of this novel, huge spoiler for this, by the way, is that the killer themselves is unkillable and unstoppable, because the killer themselves is death. Capital D, death. And it would have been so freaking cool had death been portrayed as like this eldritch horror, because essentially what happens is the veil between worlds, Scarlet Veil, the veil between worlds is falling apart, and death becomes corrupted with this idea that he wants to tear the veil down between the living and the dead permanently. No more grieving the loss of your loved ones. Everyone can be united, which essentially means there is no death and there is no life. And so this entire book follows how our main cast of characters are going to be able to trick or trap death and mend the veil between the living and the dead. And that's a really interesting concept. Like I said, it would have been cooler if, just from a mental imagery perspective, if death were portrayed as an eldritch horror, but he's portrayed as essentially having a human form, which we can talk about the allegory of the evilest thing that exists is man, right? Is humanity itself. But the problem that I have with the big bad of both of these books, but obviously it's more so emphasized in the second one. I rambled a lot through this section because I wasn't really sure what it was that I wanted to say that really bothered me about why death being the villain felt bad. And it's because by creating a villain that cannot be killed, that is essentially undefeatable, there is no other option for what your ending can be. The only way this book will end is by doing exactly what they say they're going to do. They're going to trap him back in the realm of the dead and mend the veil. There's nothing else that can happen in this story, and I think ultimately that's why this ending felt so anticlimactic to me. There was no way it was going to end any other way. To be fair, I do like the fact that Sally's whole thing has been, she's not going to win with actions, she's going to win with words. She's smart, she's kind, she's clever, and that's the thing that allows her to conquer her enemies and to win the day, which I like. I like that fact. And also, I don't know, the idea of making death a villain leaves a bad taste in my mouth, because I personally like the idea of, you know, the imagery of death being this very kind, compassionate psychopomp guide to wherever you're going to end up next. Whether that's just vanishing into nothingness, whether that's an afterlife of some sort. Like, I like the idea that death is just this very neutral character. But to have death be this, like, really evil, like, blatantly evil villain that we have to defeat feels weird to me. The other thing, and I feel like such a hypocrite saying this book establishes that Sally and Michael are together. They for sure fall in love. And I feel like a hypocrite saying that it was kind of boring, because one of the things that I like to do in my own writing is I prefer to show once they're in the relationship more so than how they got in it, because I think that there are ways to make that interesting. And here I am like, oh, how dare you do the thing that I prefer to do, except that it's boring to me. I will say, the Scarlet Veil, I really appreciated the fact that Michael and Sally didn't get together in it, and they didn't get together until this book, because that to me was one of the biggest failures of Serpent and Dove, is they got together in the first book out of 3 books. So, huge kudos to that. The timing was better, the pacing was better, but I think the romance just felt lackluster to me for whatever reason, and there wasn't a mystery to solve, there wasn't any more investigation work. These stakes felt so low. And the other thing that I think really painted my opinion of this second book of The Shadow Bride, I think I'm experiencing reader's fatigue. I think I'm burned out a little bit because I've just been like, read, which has been really nice, really wonderful. I've obviously enjoyed myself, but I'm tired. I'm used to doing the whole, I read a book anywhere between 2 days and 2 weeks, and then I take a break anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks, and I haven't been doing that. Anyway, because like I said, solid book, I enjoyed it, I enjoyed my time, but I also think the other thing is, how can you top the first book? I was obsessed with it, I couldn't stop reading. This book I could stop reading. The first book set my expectations too high. Overall, I would give this duology a solid 4 out of 5 stars. Vampires, romance, magic, murder, mystery, all those things combined. Not so much in this book. Low stakes conflict, anticlimactic climax, standard vampire romance. Another problem is, like, I don't have anything to say about the romance. It was good. It was not bad. There's nothing else that I could say about it. Anyway, I have absolutely rambled on for too long. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stereotypical YouTuber stuff. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye! Why was I looking at the microphone cord instead of the camera? I don't know.